Welcome to a journey into the deepest mysteries of the Bible, where ancient stories still echo, illuminating our paths today. Imagine a nation chosen by God, promised an everlasting legacy, yet seemingly vanished into the mist of history. The 12 tribes of Israel, the foundation of a divine covenant, did they truly disappear from the flow of time? Or are their descendants still among us, carrying a promise yet to be recognized? This is the question that has puzzled scholars, historians, and truth-seekers for millennia. In this video, we'll peel back the layers of mystery surrounding the 12 tribes of Israel. From their supernatural origins through God's promise to Abraham, to the prophetic blessings that shaped their destiny, and the dramatic dispersal that earned them the name, the Lost Tribes. What does the Bible reveal about their ultimate fate? Do ancient prophecies hold the key to unveiling their enduring legacy, or has this chapter truly closed forever? The revelations ahead may challenge everything you thought you knew, connecting you to a story grander and closer than you imagine. If you're ready to uncover this astonishing truth, watch until the end. You won't want to miss how it all comes together. Before we dive in, support our mission by hitting the like button, subscribing to the channel, and turning on the notification bell to never miss an inspiring Bible story. And if you're hungry for truth, drop the number 888 with the phrase, "I'm ready to explore," in the comments. Now, let's embark on the journey of the 12 tribes of Israel and discover whether they truly vanished or are still awaiting their moment to be called back. Thousands of years ago, in the arid land of Canaan, where desert winds whispered tales of time, a man named Abram stood beneath a canopy of twinkling stars, facing a promise beyond human dreams. In Genesis 12, 1-3, God declared, "Leave your homeland and go to the land I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you, make your name great, and you will be a blessing. Through you, all the families of the earth will be blessed." This was no mere wish. It was a sacred covenant, an eternal contract between God and humanity, with Abram, later renamed Abraham, chosen to carry the torch of faith through the darkness of history. Picture the scene. Abraham was no king or mighty warrior. He was a shepherd living in a world of polytheism, where stone idols and pagan rituals dominated life. In Mesopotamia, his homeland, a man without children was seen as stripped of legacy, forgotten by society. Yet God called him to abandon his familiar world, to embark on a journey with no clear destination. In Genesis 15:5, God led Abraham outside, pointed to the radiant night sky and said, "Look up at the heavens and count the stars, if you can. So shall your offspring be." Those shimmering stars were not just a symbol of number. They were a declaration that God's promise transcended human limits, stretching across millennia to touch generations yet unborn. This covenant was cosmic in scope. It promised not just land or descendants, but a divine mission. Through you, all the families of the earth will be blessed. It foretold that from Abraham's lineage, a nation would rise, not merely to exist, but to bridge heaven and earth. In ancient culture, such a promise was unthinkable. How could an obscure shepherd without power birth a nation that would change history? But that's how God works, choosing the small to achieve the great. The covenant with Abraham was the first seed of the 12 tribes of Israel, a holy vow etched into the flow of time. To grasp its depth, consider Abraham's faith. Genesis 15:6 states, "Abram believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness." Abraham's faith wasn't mere agreement. It was surrender, a choice to walk forward despite an unseen destination. Have you ever faced a promise that seemed too big to believe, where logic urged you to give up? Abraham chose to trust, and that act paved the way for a nation called Israel. But this promise required a miracle to come true, a miracle named Isaac. From the starry sky, the story shifts to a chapter of drama and emotion. The birth of Isaac, the long-awaited son of Abraham and Sarah. In Genesis 17:19, God proclaimed, "Sarah, your wife, will bear you a son, and you will call him Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him, an everlasting covenant, and with his descendants after him." But pause and imagine. Abraham was 100 years old, his body bearing the marks of time, his strength faded. Sarah, at 90, was long past childbearing years, her heart perhaps closed to the dream of motherhood. How could an elderly couple, seemingly forgotten by time, bring forth a child? This was no ordinary biological tale. It was a supernatural miracle, a radiant sign that God's covenant was unbound by the laws of nature. The emotions of Abraham and Sarah in this moment are a vivid mirror for every generation. Genesis 17:17 recounts that Abraham fell face down and laughed at the promise, not from disbelief, but from awe at the impossible. Sarah, in Genesis 18:12, laughed to herself, wondering, "Now that I am old, shall I have this joy?" Behind their laughter lay a mix of doubt, hope, and longing. Have you ever stood before a dream that seemed dead, only to hear a promise that stirred your heart? God responded to their doubt with a piercing question in Genesis 18:14. Is anything too hard for the Lord? This question wasn't just for Abraham and Sarah. It's an eternal declaration that no limit can thwart God's purpose. Isaac's birth was a history-altering moment. When the child's first cry echoed, it wasn't just a family's joy, but a sign that God's covenant was taking flesh. The name Isaac, meaning laughter, recalled Abraham and Sarah's laughter, but also celebrated God's faithfulness, turning doubt into blessing. In Romans 4:19-21, the Apostle Paul describes Abraham's faith. He did not weaken in faith, though his body was as good as dead. He did not waver in unbelief, but grew strong in faith, giving glory to God. Isaac was more than a child. He was the heir of the covenant, the bridge between promise and reality, paving the way for the 12 tribes to carry God's mission to the world. Isaac's significance transcends a family story. Galatians 3:29 declares, "If you belong to Christ, then you are Abraham's seed, heirs according to the promise." This means the covenant with Abraham extends beyond Israel to all who trust in God. Isaac proves that God can revive what seems dead, from Sarah's barren womb to dreams that appear lost. But to seal this covenant, a greater test awaited, a trial that would push Abraham to the edge of faith. If Isaac's birth was a miracle of hope, the next moment was the pinnacle of surrender and trust. In Genesis 22, God asked Abraham to do the unthinkable, offer Isaac, his beloved son, as a sacrifice on Mount Moriah. Picture Abraham in that moment. The aging father who waited decades to hold Isaac now faced a command that seemed to contradict God's promise. Your offspring will be like the stars. Isaac wasn't just his son. He was the embodiment of the covenant, the torch bearing the hope of an entire future nation. How could Abraham obey without losing everything? The scene on Mount Moriah is one of the Bible's most dramatic moments. Abraham rose early, prepared the wood, and led Isaac up the mountain, each step heavy with silent pain. When Isaac innocently asked, "The fire and wood are here, but where is the lamb for the sacrifice?" Genesis 22:7. Abraham's heart must have shattered, yet he answered, "God will provide the lamb." Genesis 22:8. A declaration of faith amid a storm of emotions. At the mountain's peak, Abraham bound Isaac, placed him on the altar, and raised the knife. The air was thick with unbearable silence, as if heaven itself held its breath. Every second was a test of trust, obedience, and surrender. At the critical moment, heaven intervened. In Genesis 22:12, the angel of the Lord called out, "Do not lay a hand on the boy. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." a ram appeared, caught in a thicket, becoming the substitute sacrifice. The covenant was affirmed not by ink or words, but by Abraham's absolute obedience. This test wasn't for God to learn about Abraham, but for Abraham to discover the depth of his own faith. It was also a prophetic foreshadowing. Centuries later, on that same Mount Moriah, later Jerusalem, Jesus, God's only Son, would become the Lamb of God. John 1:29, fulfilling the sacrifice Isaac only symbolized. The binding of Isaac reminds us that God's covenant is often tested through fire. Abraham not only kept Isaac, but received a reinforced promise in Genesis 22:17-18. I will make your offspring as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. Through your offspring, all nations on earth will be blessed. Isaac became the bridge between promise and reality, the heir carrying the covenant to the next generation. But the story doesn't end here. From Isaac, a new figure would emerge. Jacob, who would transform this covenant into a nation. The covenant of Abraham and Isaac passed to Jacob, a complex figure chosen by God to bear a monumental responsibility. Jacob was no perfect hero. He was a deceiver, always scheming to get what he wanted, even from the womb. In Genesis 25:23, God told Rebekah, Jacob's mother, "Two nations are in your womb. The older will serve the younger." This prophecy shaped Jacob's life, a younger son chosen to carry the covenant over his elder brother, Esau. Jacob's life was a series of struggles. In Genesis 25:29-34, he traded a bowl of stew for Esau's birthright, exploiting his brother's weakness. Later, with Rebekah's help, he disguised himself to trick Isaac into giving him Esau's blessing. Genesis 27:28-29. This act sparked controversy and forced Jacob to flee from Esau's wrath. Imagine Jacob in that moment. A deceiver, alone, carrying fear and guilt, uncertain of his future. Yet in this brokenness, God met him. In Genesis 28:12-15, as Jacob slept on a stone in the desert, he dreamed of a ladder stretching from earth to heaven, with angels ascending and descending, and God standing at the top, declaring, "I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham, and the God of Isaac. The land where you lie I will give to you and your offspring. Through you, all the families of the earth will be blessed." This vision was a spiritual turning point. Jacob, a fugitive, saw heaven open as if God were saying, "Despite your failures, I choose you." Awakening, Jacob trembled and declared, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it." Genesis 28:16. Naming the place Bethel, meaning house of God. The climax of Jacob's story came in Genesis 32, as he prepared to face Esau after years apart. That night, by the Jabbok River, Jacob wrestled with a mysterious figure. Many scholars believe it was God in human form through the night. Jacob clung on, crying, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." Genesis 32:26. God responded by renaming him Israel, meaning he who strives with God. This new name wasn't just a title, it was a prophetic decree, marking the birth of a nation through Jacob's 12 sons, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. Jacob's story proves that God uses imperfect people to fulfill his plan. From a deceiver, Jacob became Israel, the patriarch of the 12 tribes, each carrying a piece of divine identity. How could a family so full of strife, deception, and complexity give rise to a nation set apart by God? The answer lies in God's grace, transforming brokenness into an eternal legacy. From a promise under the starry sky, through Isaac's miracle, Abraham's test, and Jacob's transformation, the 12 tribes of Israel were born, carrying God's sacred covenant. Jacob's sons were not just a family. They were the foundation of a nation destined to change the world. But if this covenant was forged with such supernatural fire, how could the tribes vanish from history's flow? Was their fate forgotten, or is God's promise still awaiting its fulfillment? Stay with me as we dive into the prophetic blessings that shape the tribe's future and uncover how they received the promised land, but also faced the first cracks of division. Don't stop now, because the truth awaits you just ahead. After the tumultuous journey of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the story of the 12 tribes of Israel enters a new chapter where the sacred covenant begins to take shape through vivid prophetic words. In his final days, Jacob, now called Israel, summoned his 12 sons to his bedside in Egypt. This moment, recorded in Genesis 49, was not merely a father's farewell. It was a sacred ceremony where each word from Jacob became a divine decree, shaping the destiny of the tribes across millennia. These blessings were not just family wishes. They were a spiritual blueprint, painting a picture of each tribe's role in God's grand plan. Imagine the scene: a simple room, the faint flicker of an oil lamp casting shadows, and the 12 sons standing in a circle around their father, their hearts pounding with anticipation. Jacob, though frail in body, spoke with a voice of authority, as if the Spirit of God were speaking through him. In ancient culture, a father's blessing before death held near legal power, determining the legacy and future of an entire clan. But Jacob's words went beyond that. They were prophetic, etched into Israel's history, from the pastures of Canaan to the gates of the New Jerusalem in Revelation 21:12. Each tribe received a distinct pronouncement, reflecting their character, failures, and calling, yet all were woven into a greater purpose: to become a nation carrying God's light to the world. Hebrews 11:21 describes this moment as an act of faith. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons and worshipped, leaning on his staff. Jacob's faith, forged through years of deception, flight, and wrestling with God, now became a flame illuminating the tribe's future. But these words were not just about the past or present. They were prophecies of glory, trials, and even the dispersion to come. How could an aging father, in his final moments, foresee the fate of an entire nation? The answer lies in God's guidance, transforming Jacob's deathbed into a throne of prophecy. Among Jacob's blessings, the words for Judah shine like a regal flame in the darkness. Judah was not the firstborn, yet he was chosen for an extraordinary destiny. In Genesis 49:8-10, Jacob declared, "Judah, your brothers will praise you. Your hand will be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down to you." Judah is a lion's cub. The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until Shiloh comes, and to him will be the obedience of the nations. These words were a spiritual coronation, proclaiming that from Judah would rise a royal lineage, not only ruling Israel, but leading the nations to God. The image of the lion's cub is a powerful symbol in ancient culture, evoking authority, strength, and invincibility. In the Hebrew world, the lion was the king of beasts, and this title positioned Judah as the supreme leader. The name Judah, meaning praise, reflects the tribe's role as a banner guiding its brothers. But the term Shiloh carries deeper significance. Biblical scholars debate that Shiloh may refer to a divine king, the Messiah, who will bring peace and unity. Indeed, from the tribe of Judah came King David, Israel's greatest king, who established his throne in Jerusalem, 2 Samuel 5:4-5. Centuries later, Jesus, called the Lion of the tribe of Judah in Revelation 5:5, was born in Bethlehem, Judah's land, fulfilling Jacob's prophecy in ways beyond imagination. Remarkably, Judah was not perfect. He once took part in selling Joseph into slavery, Genesis 37:26-27, and made grave mistakes in his personal life, Genesis 38. Yet he also showed transformation, as when he defended Benjamin, willing to sacrifice himself to save his brother. Genesis 44:18-34. This redemption proves that God does not choose the perfect, but those willing to change. In Matthew 1:2-16, Jesus' genealogy is traced from Abraham through Judah to David and ultimately to the Messiah. Judah's blessing is a golden thread in the plan of salvation, stretching from a prophetic word in a tent to the cross on Golgotha. Have you ever wondered, could your past mistakes become the foundation for a greater mission if you surrender them to God? If Judah's blessing was a flame of power, Joseph's was a river of abundant blessing, flowing through the boundaries of suffering and trial. Joseph, Jacob's beloved son, lived a life of tragedy and triumph, from a dreamy youth cast into a pit by his brothers and sold into slavery to a powerful ruler in Egypt. In Genesis 49:22-25, Jacob proclaimed, "Joseph is a fruitful bough by a spring. Its branches climb over a wall. Archers bitterly attacked him, shot at him, and harassed him. Yet his bow remained steady, and his arms were made strong by the hands of the mighty one of Jacob. By the God of your father, who will help you, and by the Almighty, who will bless you." These words are a song of victory, honoring a life that turned pain into blessing. The image of a fruitful bough by a spring evokes abundance, vitality, and the ability to overcome barriers. Joseph, though betrayed, imprisoned, and forgotten, rose to save his family and Egypt from famine, Genesis 41:53-57. But his blessing extended beyond himself. In Genesis 48:5-6, Jacob adopted Joseph's two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, as his own, equal to his brothers, granting Joseph a double inheritance. This rare honor was as if Jacob sought to compensate for his son's years of suffering. This act also fulfilled a prophecy. The tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh would become mighty, occupying fertile lands in Canaan. Notably, in Genesis 48:17-20, Jacob gave a greater blessing to Ephraim, the younger son, over Manasseh, the elder. When Joseph objected, Jacob affirmed, "His younger brother will be greater than he, and his descendants will become a multitude of nations." This reversal echoes God's pattern, elevating the lesser, as with Jacob over Esau or David over his brothers. Later, Ephraim became a leading tribe in the northern kingdom, so prominent that Ephraim sometimes referred to all of Israel. Hosea 5:3. In Jeremiah 31:9, God calls Ephraim "my firstborn son," underscoring the tribe's special role. Joseph's story proves that the greatest trials can lead to the grandest blessings. Have you ever seen your darkest moments become the foundation for something greater? The blessing for Levi carries a distinct tone, a story of redemption and divine calling. In Genesis 49:5-7, Jacob spoke of Levi and Simeon. "Instruments of cruelty are in their dwelling. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel." At first glance, this is a heavy rebuke. Levi, alongside Simeon, had enacted brutal vengeance at Shechem to defend their sister Dinah's honor, Genesis 34, an act that horrified Jacob. Jacob's words seemed to decree a future of dispersion without land or glory. But Levi's story does not end in judgment. It is a journey from darkness to light, from curse to sacred calling. In Exodus 32:26-29, when Israel worshipped the golden calf at Sinai, Levi stood with Moses, declaring absolute loyalty to God. This act turned their curse into a blessing. They were chosen as the priestly tribe, serving in the tabernacle and later the temple, carrying the Ark of the Covenant and teaching God's law to the people. Deuteronomy 18:1-2 states, "The Levitical priests shall have no portion or inheritance with Israel. The Lord is their inheritance." While other tribes received land, Levi received the presence of God, an honor surpassing earthly possessions. In Malachi 2:5 through 6, God describes his covenant with Levi. My covenant with him was one of life and peace. He walked with me in truth. Levi became the spiritual heartbeat of Israel, ensuring God's covenant remained alive among his people. Levi's redemption is a profound lesson. From a tribe cursed for violence, they became intercessors, drawing Israel closer to God. In Numbers 3:11-13, God declared Levi his own, substituting for Israel's firstborn. How could a past full of mistakes lead to such a sacred calling? Levi's story reminds us that God can turn scars into stars if we choose to stand with him. After Jacob's blessings, the tribes of Israel entered a new historical phase, receiving the promised land, the land flowing with milk and honey that God swore to give Abraham's descendants. Under Joshua's leadership, Moses' successor, Israel crossed the Jordan River, defeated the Canaanite nations, and began dividing the land, Joshua 13-21. This was no ordinary geopolitical event. It was a sacred ceremony where each parcel of land became a tangible mark of God's promise. In Joshua 13:1 through 7, God told Joshua, "You are old and advanced in years, and much land remains to be possessed. Divide it by lot for Israel as an inheritance, as I have commanded you." The division by lot was not random. It was a divine dance, with God himself drawing the boundaries for each tribe. Imagine the atmosphere of that moment. Tribal leaders gathered on Canaan's plains, sunlight gleaming on green hills, their hearts racing as lots were cast. Each tribe received a portion bearing the mark of Jacob's blessing. Judah received the southern land, later birthing King David and Jesus, with Bethlehem as its precious jewel. Ephraim and Manasseh were granted fertile central lands, reflecting Joseph's prophetic abundance. Reuben, Gad, and half of Manasseh chose land east of the Jordan, but pledged to aid their brothers in conquest, showing loyalty. Numbers 32:16 through 19. Levi, as noted, received no land but was scattered among 48 cities with surrounding pastures to serve as priests, Joshua 21:41-42. The land division was the covenant's pinnacle. In Genesis 17:8, God promised, "I will give to you and your offspring the whole land of Canaan as an everlasting possession." Now, former slaves from Egypt became masters of the promised land, walking the soil their forefathers dreamed of. But the land carried responsibility. In Deuteronomy 11:16-17, God warned, "Take care lest your heart be deceived and you worship other gods. Then the Lord's anger will burn and you will perish from this good land." This warning foreshadowed the cracks to come. Could the tribes uphold the covenant while standing on holy ground? This question set the stage for the tragedy ahead. After the prophetic blessings and the division of the promised land, Israel stood at the pinnacle of God's promise, a nation set apart by God, dwelling in a land flowing with milk and honey. But the radiant light of the covenant was soon overshadowed by the darkness of disobedience. The period following Joshua, recorded in the book of Judges, was a spiral of compromise, idolatry, and injustice. The tribes, once united under the banner of victory as they crossed the Jordan, began to turn their backs on God. Judges 2:11-13 describes, "The Israelites did evil in the sight of the Lord, serving the Baals and Asherahs. They provoked the Lord, the God of their ancestors, who had brought them out of Egypt." This was not merely individual disobedience, it was a profound crack in the covenant, like a fracture spreading across the foundation of a temple. Picture the scene. The hills of Canaan, once resounding with praises to God during Joshua's victories, were now defiled by the smoke of sacrifices offered to pagan gods. The tribes, once shaped by Jacob's blessings, fell into a repetitive cycle of sin, repentance, and deliverance, as described in Judges 2:16-19. They worshipped the gods of the Amorites and Canaanites, built altars on high places, and forgot God's law. In ancient culture, idolatry was not just misguided worship. It was a betrayal of loyalty to God, akin to a spouse turning away from a marriage vow. This disobedience shook the covenant, leaving Israel vulnerable to enemies. The tragedy reached its climax after Solomon's reign, a king who ushered in a golden age, but also sowed seeds of division. In 1 Kings 11:4-8, the Bible recounts that Solomon, influenced by foreign wives, built altars to gods like Chemosh and Molech, leading the people into sin. After his death, the United Kingdom was torn apart. In 1 Kings 12:16-20, the 10 northern tribes, led by Jeroboam, rebelled against David's line, forming a separate kingdom called Israel, comprising Reuben, Simeon, Issachar, Zebulun, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Ephraim, and Manasseh. The southern kingdom, called Judah, included only Judah and Benjamin, with some Levites serving at the Jerusalem temple. To consolidate power, Jeroboam erected 2 golden calves at Bethel and Dan, replacing worship at Jerusalem. 1 Kings 12:28-30. This act was a fatal blow to the covenant, as if Israel tore apart the sacred tapestry woven by their forefathers. How could a nation that witnessed God's miracles fall into such deep darkness? This division was a harbinger of the greater tragedy awaiting them. In 722 BCE, a historical storm swept through the northern kingdom, leaving an enduring mark of sorrow. The Assyrian Empire, with its brutal military might, besieged Samaria, Israel's capital, for 3 years. In 2 Kings 17:5-6, the Bible records, the king of Assyria invaded the entire land, marched against Samaria, and besieged it. He took Israel captive, deporting them to Halah, Habor, by the Gozan River, and the cities of the Medes. The 10 northern tribes, Reuben, Simeon, Issachar, Zebulun, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Ephraim, and Manasseh, were exiled from the Promised Land, sent to distant regions under Assyrian rule. This was not just a military defeat. It was the disintegration of a nation, as if a part of the covenant was erased from the earth. Imagine the heart-wrenching scene. Dusty roads leading away from Samaria, where thousands of families were herded, children clinging to parents and the elderly trudging with broken hearts. Assyria, with its ruthless policy, deliberately scattered the tribes, blending them with other nations to erase Israel's identity. In Assyrian culture, exiles were often forced to marry foreigners, learn new languages, and worship the conqueror's gods, like Asher or Nergal. Gradually, names like Ephraim and Asher seemed to sink into the currents of history, becoming distant memories. Historians call them the 10 lost tribes, a phrase evoking mystery and loss, as if they vanished into thin air. Yet the Bible tells a different story. Though scattered, the tribes were not entirely forgotten. In 2 Chronicles 31-11, years after the exile, King Hezekiah of Judah invited remnants from Ephraim, Manasseh, and other tribes to Jerusalem for Passover, showing that some retained their Israelite identity. Amos 9:9 proclaims, "I will shake the house of Israel among the nations, as grain is sifted in a sieve, yet not a single grain will fall to the ground." This powerful image declares that though the tribes were scattered, God watched over every grain, every person. The dispersion was a punishment, but also part of a greater plan, where God preserved his people in mystery. Could those in exile keep the covenant's flame alive in foreign lands? This question leads to God's promise of restoration. In the darkness of dispersion, the light of God's promise burned brightly. Prophets from Amos to Ezekiel delivered a message of hope. God would gather his people, no matter where they were. In Amos 9:8-9, God declares, "I will not utterly destroy the house of Jacob. I will shake the house of Israel among the nations, yet not a single grain will fall to the ground." These words are a torch in the night, affirming that dispersion is not the end. Hosea 1:10-11 continues, "The number of the Israelites will be like the sand of the sea. They will come up from the land, for great will be the day of Jezreel." The word Jezreel, meaning God sows, becomes a symbol of restoration when God's people are called back as children of the living God. The most powerful vision comes in Ezekiel 37:21-22. "I will take the Israelites from among the nations where they have gone. I will make them one nation in the land, on the mountains of Israel. They will no longer be two nations, nor ever again divided into two kingdoms." This is a divine proclamation, promising not only to gather the tribes, but to reunite Judah and Israel under one king, often understood as the Messiah. In Jeremiah 31:10-11, God says, "Hear the word of the Lord, O nations. He who scattered Israel will gather it and keep it as a shepherd keeps his flock." The image of a shepherd seeking lost sheep affirms that no tribe is beyond God's reach. The New Testament reinforces this promise. In James 1:1, the letter is addressed to the 12 tribes in the dispersion, indicating that in the first century, the tribes were still recognized in God's plan. Luke 2:36 introduces Anna, a prophetess from the tribe of Asher, appearing in Jerusalem, proving traces of the lost tribes remained. In Romans 11:26, Paul declares, "All Israel will be saved, as it is written, the deliverer will come from Zion." Revelation 7:4-8 lists the 12 tribes, with 12,000 sealed from each, and Revelation 21:12 describes the New Jerusalem's 12 gates bearing their names. These references confirm that God never forgets his people. Was the dispersion truly the end, or merely a temporary chapter in God's eternal plan? If the tribes are not lost in God's eyes, where are their descendants today? This question has sparked countless debates, hypotheses, and legends over centuries. After the Assyrian exile, the northern tribes seem to dissolve into other nations, but their traces may persist, hidden within humanity's vast tapestry. Various communities worldwide claim descent from the tribes, offering inspiring and mysterious stories. In Ethiopia, the Beta Israel, or Ethiopian Jews, assert they are descendants of the tribe of Dan, recounting that their ancestors migrated through Egypt after Solomon's time, preserving Hebrew customs like observing the Sabbath and Passover. In northeast India, the Bnei Menash claim descent from Manasseh, maintaining ancient rituals and singing songs reminiscent of Israel. In Afghanistan, some Pashtun tribes have legends linking to ancient Israel, though lacking clear historical evidence. These claims, though not fully verified, evoke an inspiring idea. God's covenant may have spread like underground rivers, flowing through continents hidden within nations. In Isaiah 11:11-12, God says, "The Lord will extend his hand a second time to recover the remnant from Assyria, Egypt, Pathros, Cush, Elam, Shinar, Hamath, and the islands of the sea. He will gather the exiles of Israel and collect the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth." This vision suggests a second exodus, not only physical but spiritual, where God's people rise from every corner of the world. Some scholars propose the northern tribes may have merged with Judah over time or migrated to distant lands, carrying their sacred legacy unknowingly. In modern times, genetic and archaeological studies have sought to trace their footsteps, but answers remain shrouded in mystery. Some researchers suggest European Jewish communities, like the Ashkenazi, may carry part of the dispersed tribe's heritage. Traditions like Sabbath observance or ancient songs in remote regions hint that God's covenant endures even in unexpected forms. Could the descendants of the tribes be walking among us, bearing an unrecognized legacy? In Psalm 147, verses 2-3, the Bible affirms, The Lord builds up Jerusalem. He gathers the exiles of Israel. He heals the brokenhearted. Dispersion was not abandonment, but preparation for a grand return. The story of the 12 tribes is not just history or an archaeological puzzle. It is a mirror reflecting God's faithfulness, who never abandons his promise despite his people's failures. The dispersion of the 10 tribes was a consequence of disobedience, but it did not annul the covenant. In Romans 11:1-2, the Apostle Paul asks, "Has God rejected his people? By no means. For I myself am an Israelite, from the seed of Abraham of the tribe of Benjamin. God has not rejected his people whom he foreknew." These words are a flame of hope, affirming that God's covenant is eternal, unbroken by human error. This lesson touches every heart. In moments when you feel lost, as if your dreams or purpose are scattered like the tribes, God still sees you. In Psalm 139, verses 7-10, David writes, "Where can I flee from your spirit? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, your hand will lead me." No tribe, no individual, is beyond God's sight. His covenant is a promise that even in dispersion, he is working to restore, turning fragments into a complete picture. The tribe's dispersion is also a call to vigilance. In Matthew 24:31, Jesus speaks of the last days. He will send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds. This prophecy suggests that Israel's gathering is part of the ultimate plan, when God's people from all nations are called home. In 2 Chronicles 36:23, after Judah's exile, Persian King Cyrus declares, "The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has charged me to build him a house in Jerusalem." If God could use a foreign king to restore Judah, could he not do the same for the scattered tribes? Their story reminds us that God always keeps his promise, no matter how time passes or history shifts. The story of the 12 tribes of Israel is an epic journey, from the sacred promise under a starry sky, through prophetic blessings, to the darkness of dispersion. Though 10 tribes seem to vanish into history's current, the Bible affirms that God never forgets his people. From the prophecies of Amos and Ezekiel to the vision of the New Jerusalem in Revelation, the tribes remain etched in God's memory, like precious gems in an eternal crown. They are not just history. They are a reminder that God's covenant transcends time, bringing hope to every generation, including you and me. Today, this story invites you to reflect. Are we living in a time when the tribes are being gathered? Are the signs of the promise appearing around you? Share your thoughts in the comments. How do you feel about God's faithfulness through this story? If this message has touched your heart, hit the like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear the truth, and subscribe to the channel, turning on notifications to join us for more inspiring Bible stories. The God who led Abraham through the desert and gathers his people from the four corners of the earth is still writing your story. Hold fast to faith, for his promise never fails. We'll see you in the next journey, where truth continues to unfold. May God bless and keep you on your path to his light. Until next time.